January 22nd, 2023. The Board of Education makes available at least one current copy of the Open Meetings Act, which is posted on the west wall of the meeting room and accessible to members of the public. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move that the Board of Education of District 15 approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
I'll second.
Thank you. Your votes, please. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
First up on the agenda is a discussion of the 2023-2024 handbooks, and Mrs. Timmerman's going to start with the preschool.
I would love to. I'm really quite,
And we like that.
I wasn't gonna be here, so I really have it on my phone here. Got it right? So, we didn't add a whole lot. The behavior is something that everyone else changed. We have a no expulsion policy in preschool and have for a long time, so I didn't have to add that. Page 3, we did add who can attend preschool. The date for preschool is usually July 31st. We have accepted special education students when they turn 3, so if their birthday's after July 31st. We added EL families as well as sixpence families. We have a huge amount of EL families here, and we know the earlier we can get them in, the better they are. So we actually added 4 kids this year after that July 31st for EL families. And by the end, one was talking, so that was really, really cool. So to get them in, so we added that. On page 5, attendance. We had 3 families that maybe came once a month. And with our huge wait list, I don't think that's fair for our kids that are on the wait list. So we added the verbiage of if your child is absent for more than 20 days a semester. That's still a lot to be gone, but we started that way. They're treating it kind of like a drop-in daycare, and we're just not going to do that. So we'll start with 20, and if we need to whittle that down. One family knew, oh, they're serious about kicking kids out, so we're going to get there. So I think just the precedence of booting some kids helped. In page 11, we are adding online payment this year, so just how the families can do that. So that was just something the parents asked, that we could do some online payment, so we added that in there as well. Any questions? Oh, sorry, Eric, I didn't see you over there. Fabulous.
Thank you. Mrs. Replogle and Mr. Jansen for elementary.
I told Betty I'll take the short one, she gets the long one, so.
I'm not reading that.
Ours is extremely short and simple too. On page 13, we just talked about dress and appearance, item number 4, or number 4, item C. We've had a lot of issues with hoodies, which shouldn't be a big thing, but it is because they always want to wear them up. So we just put the language in there in the verbiage. Hoodies can be worn, we just want the hoods down during the class period more than anything. And so if it's in there so we can revert back to parents. Very simple.
And our other issue is the same one that Missy mentioned, and it's about the violation of school rules, our code of conduct. And for us, as we read through all of that, even though it's in our handbook, a lot of that addresses the middle school and the secondary area. So the only area that really is of concern to us is that the area under expulsion, item H, which says you can no longer suspend somebody in preschool through 2nd grade. And though that happens very, very, very seldom, there have been issues of real violence and behavior that's a danger to themselves or to others. And we have had to do short suspensions very, very seldom, but a few times. So we will get together and discuss so that we're consistent in how we're going to handle that, because now we cannot suspend a child, for us, kindergarten through 2nd grade.
Out of school suspension.
Out of school suspension.
Out of school.
So we would have to address that somehow within
And within the schools.
the building. And at Pelican, for example, there isn't a spare room anywhere. But we do need to be consistent in how we do it. So we will meet and come up with consistent.
Because we'll have to get creative with place and personnel to monitor
We don't have
that
extra staff
situation.
to take care of that or whatever, so.
I do have a question. Do you have pre-K?
No.
We put pre-K
But-
2 in there because that's how it's worded.
That's
in
how the
the-
law is written.
That's how it's
It
worded.
says administration into 4 buildings.
Well,
And you're
1, 2,
including
3,
preschool.
4, we included the preschool, but they do not suspend. But we'll include Missy because she needs to be included if some strange thing happened and she would want to do that. It'd have to be consistent.
Okay, I guess I was just thinking it says elementary
No, it's a,
handbook and I.
right, but the rule is pre-K. That particular rule is pre-K through
Okay.
2nd grade.
So does she need that in her handbook?
No, because she has a no suspension, but we'll include Missy. And also that'll carry on after this next year. And Missy
Right.
will be administrating in the new building, so she needs to be part of that decision. It's a very long Part H, I know that, but the bottom line is, it says you can't suspend
Out-of-school suspension,
out of school suspension, yes, not in school, out of school suspension.
which doesn't happen very often anyway.
Any questions for us?
Other than those.
Other than
Mike.
No, then that,
All
all
right,
right.
thank you.
For the hoodies, just turn up the temperature. Like here.
They still wear them.
It's
Perfect in here today.
It's perfect in here.
It is so
We had summer school students come in, they're all in hoodies, and I asked, this morning, I asked them, do you wear those if it's like 2 o'clock in the afternoon? Yeah. So,
It's not nice.
all right. We had a couple changes to note in here. One of them's code of conduct related, one of them's grading related, so you guys have the handout. So top to bottom, a couple simple things, assignment book, replacement costs, those things that went up, but honestly, it doesn't come into play a whole lot. A lot of times we give those out anyway. Grading system, this is a change that we'll start next school year. We used to be on a 50% summative, 30% progressing, 20% formative weight with our grades. We're gonna change that to just going formative and summative, which is pretty standard across most schools. The progressing category was kind of self-created a few years ago, which was intended for quizzes and projects and things like that. Well, we found it wasn't real uniform in how we're using it, so we went to a straightforward summative and formative 70-30 split for our grades, and that'll start in August. Page 4, we changed a couple. We've added the Power of ICU, that program that has worked pretty well as far as getting and tracking our daily missing assignments. So we've added the verbiage of how that works in the middle school into the handbook, and replaced some of the 8th period expectations. We just talked about what the ICU program is.
Next, on page 5 and pages 9 through 15, we had a lot of Boys Town behavior skills within the handbook, and we have implemented the PBIS last year, and now we just have a handbook to match all the PBIS expectations across campus, the common behavior expectations, what a minor and major behavior definition is, what the consequences are. We removed some of the things that kind of contradicted each other, like Boys Town language compared to, it was very similar, but it's all the common language now, where what we're talking with the students with, what teachers are talking, it's all uniform in the handbook, and not Boys Town over here and PBIS. So that's where the page 5, page 9 through 15, and the removals all kind of coincide with each other. So those are, all the behavior expectations match up with everything that the students hear every day, and what we teach our students. So they all match up uniform now.
Page 22 through 27, that's simply the Student Discipline Act. They had mentioned before with LB 705, there's some changes. A lot of them not really large for us, but we just simply took out what we had in there previously and put in the couple new additions or subtractions that the legislation had put in there. So that's just to keep it up to date with state statute. Then page 31 just expanded upon what our SRP language is, the lockdown, secure, hold, that sort of thing, just saying we practice those drills throughout the school year. So that's it.
Thank you.
Are we off the hook? All right, thank you.
Mr. Studer's gonna tell us about high school.
Good evening, thanks for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. Changes to the high school handbook are, you've got this handout. Our Renaissance academic program was on a separate sheet at the very beginning of the handbook. We feel a better placement of that is in the academic section of the handbook. We made some additional wording on our tardies. Once we get kids to school, we do a really good job of getting them from class to class on time, but we have trouble getting a growing number of students to school on time. And so this mostly is going to look at first hour tardies, and we have included wording in our handbook that just says that right now, students get 3 free tardies, and then they start acquiring detentions. And this just gives us the ability to start issuing a bigger consequence if it becomes chronic. Some of the schools in our conference actually limit students to participate in attending ball games or prom or those kinds of things until they earn detention time and to earn time back. So we're kind of contemplating that. We feel this wording gives us a lot of latitude to address our first hour tardies. To be honest with you, sometimes it's not the students' fault. Sometimes it's parents that aren't getting them to school on time. So we have some gray area there we need to work through. We want to change our vaping consequence from a day of in-school suspension to a 1 to 5 days out-of-school suspension consequence. We feel like we've been dealing with vaping now for a couple years, and we've set the message that we are not going to continue just to give 1-day in-school suspensions. We have a lot of kids repeat. We want to have the ability to give a bigger consequence if they continue to violate state law and use vapes in our school. We are going to change our activity pass amounts to be in compliance with the Trailblazer Conference. Gus told me to let you know that on a regular varsity game, it'll be $6 for adults, $5 for students, which is a $1 increase from 5 and 4. For just simply a reserve or freshman game, it'll be $5 and $4, 5 for adults, 4 for children. And if we have Trailblazer Conference tournaments, it'll be $7 and $6, 7 for adults, 6 for kids. We also made changes to our academic eligibility as the new state law dictates. Students can participate or will be able to start participating in activities and athletics having only enrolled in one class, earning 5 credits. But the NSA has still held firm that they have to have 20 credits earned the semester before. So you stop and think about that. A student might say, I want to just enroll in one class and go out for football. Well, they need to have earned 20 credits the semester before in order to be eligible through NSAA guidelines. The only place we accept and so we look at where would they be getting those credits from. It might be like a homeschool situation or something like that. Remember, the district policy is the only credits we accept in a homeschool type setting are from the University of Nebraska Independent High School. So we don't think there's going to be a lot of that, but we needed to add that as was passed by our legislature. And then we just kind of started looking at our handbook as to some things through technology maybe we don't need in there anymore. We don't think kids ever look in the handbook to look at what a phone number is for the high school. We took out our coach and activity sponsor page because quite honestly it's always evolving. What we print won't be right throughout the year or even before the school year starts. With our kids going one-to-one with computers, we don't think we need a whole thing about computer lab, media center. We had some verbiage in there we didn't feel we needed. Messages from home, what that simply means is if a parent calls the high school, we just had in there that we would contact their child if they didn't need to. 98% of our kids have cell phones, and those parents are calling them anyway. We just don't feel that's appropriate anymore. And then student aids, that's in our student registration handbook. We don't have vending machines other than a pop machine or flavored water machine. We don't have candy and jube gels and all that kind of stuff anymore. So we took that out. And then I created when I was assistant principal, a focus on a base program. We still have them, but we don't ever call them that. So we just decided to take that verbiage out. So just a lot of revision. As you remember, maybe not, I do, the last 2 years, we've ordered our handbooks by the deadline that a company that we've been using has given us. And they've sat out in the ocean for the first 2 months of school because they can't get them off the boats and into the delivery system. And so we are going to use a local printer this year and print our own handbooks. We are done with them. If Any questions? Thank you.
Okay, the next two handbooks that we will talk about are the substitute and the classified one. So we're gonna move to staff handbooks now and look at those changes. The substitute handbook had very few changes this year. Page 1, we just updated the application procedures to let them know that it is an online application process that must be completed. Page 16 and 17, we had energy guidelines about how to be energy efficient. Well, substitutes are in the building and then they're out of the building. I mean, they are not there constantly. So we feel that that is the responsibility of our classified, our certified staff, and not necessarily our substitute staff. And there were just other minor grammatical corrections that we adjusted in the substitute handbook. Okay, moving on to the classified handbook. On page 1, we added a statement that our classified staff are at-will employees, and we updated the employee classifications to match the schedule that we previously adopted and approved by the Board of Education. Page 3, we modified the salary range to hourly rates. We cleaned up language on the review dates. We updated information for an individual that is re-employed with the district and added about service year steps. So you can see most of the things happening within this handbook is making sure that it reflects what the board approved with the pay increase with the classified staff. And then page 9, we just added that, we added an L, the paid employee semester stipends, so that's just the description of that new practice. And then there were minor grammatical corrections, but most of the classified pieces came because of the change that the board approved.
If a classified staff leaves, decides to come back, do they get credit for any years of service they had previously? So let's say
Yes,
I
we
worked there
have
20
been-
years, I took a year off and I come back, I get credit for that.
If it's in the same position, so we're doing it more so case by case
Sure, I just-
basis, but yes. We have added that as a practice that we are looking at bringing back, or adding to, because we previously did not. Yep. Okay, certified.
All right, certified handbook changes, again, primarily reflect legislative changes or practices that we have been doing, and making sure that we have them in the handbook. So the first one was on page 5, and this was a reflection of a change or legislation that, a recommended policy from Perry Law Firm that we will be adding into and showing you tonight. That it added statements from proposed policy 4171 that talked about teacher resignation, and if a teacher resigns, what the specific dates are and what the board can hold that person to and when they are effectively considered resigned. So the way to think about that, and it's kind of confusing, but March 15th is the floor and April 15th is the ceiling. And so on March 15th is when we can notify or ask teachers, we can actually give it to them anytime up to March 15th, but they don't have to sign a letter of intent prior to March 15th. On April 15th, they are automatically considered contracted for the next year, and that's also the date by which we have to let them know if we are not renewing their contract. So that became more clear with the addition of language on page 5. We want to make sure that got in there because it is policy that we're asking you to approve. Page 10 just basically added the statement that was already on page 9 under non-paid absence, but we wanted to make sure it was also under page 10, section 3, payroll deductions for absences in excess of paid leave. The payroll deduction will occur during the pay period of the absence, so we wanted to make sure that was in there. And then finally, the addendum to the contract, or excuse me, the addendum to the handbook that we will be adding in is what you've been made aware of, we've been talking about, is the comp time practice that I put in front of you. And basically, after meeting with all the groups of people, we have one more meeting that we have to hold with teachers, but this is where we've landed in having everybody read through it, ask questions, check the language, make sure that it's clear for everybody. This is kind of where we've landed. So We would be adding this as just an addendum to the handbook, so we have the ability to change it or make changes to it in the next year if we want to, or simply remove it. Meetings with everybody went really well. We had a lot of great conversations and discussions. So that's how we would be addressing the comp time practice that we would be using. And then there were just some other minor date revisions in the certificate handbook that we had to shore up based on changes in dates, so.
Without reading the whole thing here real quickly, is there something in here that comp time will not carry over?
There is, it's in the, let's see, 1, 2, 3, fourth paragraph, it says comp
Does
time
not carry over.
does not carry over.
Okay, and then the other question is that, since it's earned time, do we have to pay them out on comp time, or it's use it or lose it?
It's use it or lose it.
Okay,
We're talking about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we clarified that with our legal.
yeah, I just wanted to make sure.
Any other questions? Okay. That, I think, concludes the handbook portion.
Now we're moving on to policy updates.
Strategic plan.
Oh, yes,
Yes.
okay.
Okay, so the strategic plan updates have been given by the preschool, the elementary, the middle school, and high school. So the part that you have not heard from is the district. So what has the district been doing in order to meet the strategic plan initiatives that have been set forth? You can see that there is a little packet of information in front of you just to highlight some of the key pieces, and I'm not going to go through it all. I'm going to just pick up the big pieces. But if you have driven east of here, you know that the PK through 5 construction is going very well. And I know that I did hear that there is maybe some drywall that might start going up, which is very exciting, because that means that we have an enclosed structure. So, we also, in regards to strategy 1, we also have done a lot with our safety and security training and drills, and we continue to do a lot with that. One of the things that we have wanted to do is make sure that we have consistent communication formats with our standard response protocols, so that when we send out a message to parents to say BHS was on a hold, when preschool sends it out, it's the same exact message, same exact format. So we've been working on those pieces and getting those out to buildings and to the administrators, and making sure that that is the message when it goes out, it is in that same way. So that sums up what we've done with strategy 1, and that really is implementing new and existing buildings and technology infrastructure that are adaptable to new curriculum and instruction involving needs of individuals and communities. Strategy 2, incorporating social emotional learning into the regular operations of the school. We have done a district-wide social emotional screener. We've really kind of figured out what we want to do with that. So what we are looking at is we've piloted the screeners at the K-5 level this year. We have chosen one. We are determined that we will utilize DESA next year for all K through 5 students. This is a strengths-based social emotional screener, and it will be our universal screener. So what we will do is we will administer it, and then based upon the results, that will help us determine our small groups, our individual one-on-ones where our counselors will need to work with students that are at a higher risk. So that's what it does, is it just alerts us, gives us that information so that we can then start grouping students and figuring out how to address each child to make sure that they feel safe and make sure that they are given the supports they need to be successful. The other piece is that we continue to promote staff wellness as well. We have increased services to the Beatrice Community Hospital EAP program, and we have also met with Dr. Horton to continue to look at how do we provide services to our staff. Because we know sometimes when I have a classroom of students and I have a student that has maybe social emotional problems, I don't have the tools to help that child be successful in my class, so my only option is to push them out of my class at that point in time because I cannot help them. So we need to continue to provide our staff with tools to put in their toolbox. So Dr. Horton is using that PLC time to go around and meet with our staff individually in PLCs to provide them with training on how to help students be successful in the classroom setting. Here are some strategies to utilize. So that has been a great addition, and we are meeting with her in July to re-evaluate and continue to push out and build those pieces as we move forward. So that is strategy 2. Strategy 3 is about recruiting, retaining, and developing high-quality staff, faculty, and administration. And as we have talked, we've evaluated our salary schedules, and that was a great piece that was approved by the board and reflected in handbooks. The next piece you actually have the handbook for.
Did we fill all, are we still looking on any positions or?
Certified, no.
Certified, kinda. I would say kind of. Our English teacher at the high school, we're using a student teacher to begin with first
Oh, yeah, we
semester.
talked about that, yeah.
And then at the elementary, we will be looking probably for an elementary teacher come January. But we will continue to have, we're looking for a business teacher as well. We will continue to have probably applications open. Which one? First grade?
Student teacher, pedagogue.
First
Oh,
grade student.
First semester.
Yeah. So, and we do have a couple places where we are using student teachers to begin with that first semester, just like we did this year with 2 of our teachers. At Paddock Lane where they student taught, they had everything else done, all their coursework done, they student taught, and then they were offered contracts. So we have 2 additional situations just like that this upcoming year. So yeah, certified, we will probably start off in August advertising for positions just because we know that we're going to have them. And we'll continue to seek out. Classified, we are having a hiring fair interviews on Thursday. So we're excited about that. And how many interviews do we have? We have 9 interviews on that day, and we have 15 positions that we still have left to fill. Custodial, maintenance, and I know kitchen staff, we're still continuing to look for staff. We are not full staff there. Anything else here?
No, maintenance position, we hired one right at the end of the school year and has worked out phenomenally. It's been great, so.
Yeah. Okay, so the Mentors You Matter program was a program that was new this year. It was brought to us by, it was an initiative developed and thought about by an educator in our district, and so it was kind of cool because it was a very ground up approach. But we piloted it at the middle school and high school. We chose the middle school and high school because they have a little bit more flexibility than the elementary. So we have one mentor at the middle school that covers all of the middle school new teachers. We have one mentor at the high school that covers all of the new teachers at the high school. There were challenges, there were successes. You can see that the feedback from the teachers, so I surveyed all the middle school, high school teachers and said, hey, what do you think? What needs to be changed? What needs to be added? What went well? And there was some great feedback, and a lot of it was the support that they received, whether it was through a text, because there were texts that were, happening at 6 o'clock at night as to, oh my gosh, I got this email from this parent and I need help. Or there were constant communication throughout the year. One of the things that the mentors did was try to weekly check on. High school was a little bit easier because of the plan time. The plan time was a block period, so the high school teacher had a little bit more flexibility. At the middle school, the teacher that was chosen, her plan time was during study hall. And so it was very hard because teachers were managing their study hall classes and working with kids to get them caught up and doing other things. So for her to meet with the new teachers, it was a little bit more difficult during that point in time. So she used more understands. You have one person that also has that expectation of high instruction, high engagement, and this is the culture of BHS. This is the culture of BMS, and we're striving for this. So it was nice to have that consistent piece, because sometimes, and the other thing is, it did not have to be in that same content area, because they also had their PLC, so that they could go then and get more of that content-based support during their PLC, but then the mentor was on top of that as well. So it was a nice position to add. It was more of that just coach for the teachers that just provided that coaching piece to help them continue to improve. So you can see that we are looking at how to continue to improve, and one of the things that we are also adding next year is, with the help of NDE, is a Get Set mentor program. And this is for our new special education teachers, because we know that they need a lot of support as well, especially when you have all that paperwork and all of those practices that are in place that you have to follow. So those are the things, and how do you help them if they are new in the district? How do you help them communicate with a very seasoned teacher on what the accommodations are and what modifications need to be made in their classrooms? So that will be there. And then the other piece that we did with Strategy 3, we've done a lot with Strategy 3, is we've done formative assessment training. We brought in Chad Dumas, and Chad Dumas provided training to our K-5 teachers, really going through the standards and determining the priority standards and the learning targets. So based upon the standard, we then broke it down into learning targets, and they worked on developing their formative assessments. So what are the 2 to 3 questions that we are going to ask that can clearly tell us whether students are mastering this priority standard or not? Next year, we will be doing that with 612, and so we will be doing the development piece with 612, and with K5, we will be providing more training on, okay, so now what? I have this data, what do I do? What does the data conversation look like? What do I need to evaluate? What different pieces do I put in place for kids that get it? What different pieces do I put in place for kids that need that reteaching? And then the last thing we did for Strategy 3 is we put in place the issue investigations for our PLCs. There were a lot of gains made with just student achievement, curriculum development, and teacher professional learning. So this document has all of the information that comes from our PLC leaders. And the one thing is, with each PLC group, it talks about what is the issue that they looked at, what was their goal, what were the results, and what was the follow-up. So you can see that K through 5 really focused on that formative assessment, pacing guides, the weekly data discussions. When you get to middle school, they focused on narrowing priority standards and learning targets, increasing proficiency on priority standards, learning targets. High school focused on ACT standards and really narrowing those down, as well to priority standards and learning targets, and figuring out how to put things in place that really help students understand what the ACT is about. As you move on, our PE focused on participation in improved health, exploratory and CTE courses, focused on increasing opportunities, asking depth of knowledge for students, aligning standards to core practices as well. And then our counselors focused on life skills and helping students develop long-term coping strategies as well as career goals. And lastly, our special education focused on helping staff understand how to help all students retain and seek success. So I'm not going to read through all of them. I just gave you kind of a brief nutshell of what was happening in our PLCs, but there were some great things, and there's some great, if you look at it, there are some great data points that have been put in place, and it's been fun just working with the teachers to help them continue to grow. So that is Strategy 3, looking at that recruiting, retaining, and recruiting, training, and retaining. Strategy 4, providing research-based instructional delivery strategies to meet each student's unique learning needs. So we do have a career tech education strategic plan that helps guide our CTE courses and our CTE teachers as well as our counselors. One of the things that we often hear with PLCs is, okay, well, we're singletons, what do we do? We don't, I don't have a focus. I'm the only one who teaches this course. Well, you still have a huge importance in what we do in our building. And so we gave them a framework to help guide them through how can they make their classes and their components much more impactful, and how can they work to help students realize their potential and build where they are moving forward. So we implemented a career fair at the middle school for grade 8. We implemented a hiring fair at the high school for all grades, and we will continue to those pieces as well. We also added the DONE's EPIC program, their educator pipeline initiative collaboration to build our PK through 12 educators. So that is for the next 2 years, students will have access to 5 free DONE education courses. And if they do those 5, they could graduate in 3 years if they end up going to DONE, because they would have 5 courses already taken care of towards their education certificate. So I will tell you, in the teacher shortage, this is a huge piece, and ESU 5 and ESU 6, they were chosen to participate in this, and so we gladly raised our hand and said, absolutely.
Jackie, I think we had like 26 kids sign up for those classes.
Yeah, it's really cool. And as we look at that strategy 4, action plan 2, just kind of one of the things we really continue to talk about is that research-based instructional delivery strategies. So making sure that what we're doing in the classroom is sticking. Because that's the biggest thing, is when we sometimes look at, okay, well, I've taught it. Have you really? So what's the data showing you? What's the data showing me? And what strategy are you using that's really impacting all kids? Not just 50%. So those are things that, really working on those conversations and building those pieces, that will be where we will move next year. As we look at that piece. So strategy 5, there's a lot of different things that we've done that I've already discussed. So that is, we've been busy this year. Any questions about the district strategic plan? After you read the stuff, if you have any questions, feel free to holler. Yes.
We're too excited to get to the policy updates.
I know you are.
You were trying to skip ahead anyway.
Yeah, exactly. You're trying to skip over the fun.
Just can't wait, yeah, I know. Before we get there, are we there?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Yes.
I want to say just a couple of words in response to the topics we covered tonight. First of all, thank you to our administrative team, because the policies, the statutes that changed at the legislature, those had to all be gone through by the law firm, who then had to get them to us, which we didn't get until, I think it was on Monday or Tuesday, and last week, and so then we had to break them all down, and they got them at the same time we got them, and they had to break them all down and make sure that the legal parts of the handbooks were correct. So thank you to you for your work in a very tight situation, tight frame scenario, and being here tonight to explain those changes. And then I just want to thank the entire group, Dr. Nielsen included, in terms of our strategic plan, because this is a living, breathing document that takes time to update, it takes time to report on, and it's a description of what is happening in our district, and there's a lot going on. So thank you to all of you, thank you for updating this and reporting on it, and thank you to everyone for making it a living, breathing document, because no one person, and I think we do understand the importance of the team, but no one person can get it done by themselves. So
Yeah, I would echo that too. I appreciate, all the work that went into creating it, but then just the consistent updates. And that's what it is meant to be. It's a working document, not just something that's sitting on a shelf, so.
it really does make me feel proud to think back, 2 years ago when we did this, we made a commitment to make sure updates were given, so. Okay. Now, the most exciting part of the evening, the policy updates, which I know I am going to try and keep as brief as possible. I will pause, and if you have questions.
I'm like thinking.
Jason, we're gonna be here until the middle.
All right, here we go. First of all, understand that what we're giving you tonight are the red line / new policy versions. So the red line versions are what lawyers have gone through and said, these are the things we have to strike out, or these are the things we have to add. There are some new policies that we're gonna talk about tonight as well. So there are recommended policies from Perry Law Firm. They've all been reviewed, analyzed by them, that we got last week. And we also are providing you a copy of our current policies so you can compare and contrast. So how this will work is we'll be making all the necessary revisions and clarifications to these policies for your first review and consideration on July 10th. So on July 10th at the board meeting, you'll get the first look at all of this combined together to you. Sorry that wasn't tonight, but it just couldn't be done that quick. Tonight is designed to provide you notice of the required changes due to legislation. In July, we'll be providing you with the full proposed policy for first review. Okay? Because we don't have, we don't have a July calendar, so then the next update will have to be August. So, first one, 1101, use of school facilities for student groups. Legislation changed this year, and this is all via 705, but 705 was the big package, and then there were different bills inside. This specific policy changed due to legislation that established new parameters around visitors from recognized youth organizations. Recognize is a key word, and administrators, I know you picked up on this too, but upon request, a visitor can provide oral or written information to students, but there are new parameters around those. First of all, the visit can only occur during non-instructional hours. Secondly, they can only be recognized from the youth organization 36 USC United States Code Subtitle 2 Part B youth organizations. So the reason for that is that it's trying to establish parameters to make sure that we're only letting in people that are recognized by the youth organizations groups in the United States. So,
Give me an example.
Boy Scouts.
Give me an example that's not recognized.
Or any of the church affiliated ones like what, Kiwanis?
Kiwanis.
Yeah, or,
CCD.
you know, on the other side of that, the Atheists of America, something like that. So,
Do they have to provide proof?
they have to pass, they are subject to a background check at their cost. So,
Prior to them being able
prior to them being there. So what that means, if someone approaches us and says, we want to come talk to your kids, number one, it has to be in enough time that a background check can be done, if they provide one, and they have to pay for it. And that we have time to approve that and do our due diligence to make sure of who we're putting in front of kids.
Who got told no?
I don't know for sure.
Well, I mean, it must have been somebody that they told no to, and now they decided they wanted to show up. I'm sure it's
Do you have a list
Yeah.
of recognized that online?
It's online, yep, yep. And so that is available, and we've been told by attorneys that they'll provide a list to us if we have any questions. So that's 1101.
Why did they have to specifically spell out Boy Scouts?
I don't know. I don't know if Boy Scouts were the ones that got told no somewhere, and I think that's probably, this bill was referred to as the Boy Scout bill, so that leads me to believe that that's who it was, but I don't
Boy
know.
Scouts got in trouble at some point.
They did.
So. Good questions.
But then it says, so if we let one group in, then we need to let them all in? Is that what this number 3 is?
If they're on that list,
Oh, they're on the list.
Yep.
Okay, I'll go
And they
look at
ask.
the
and
list.
they ask,
And they
and they
ask.
provide
And their
appropriate
background
document.
checked and all that.
Yep.
Mhm.
So it started out, I'll be honest with you, this bill started out kind of scary because it was anybody. And then there was a lot of, that's where being part of the stance organization and the legislative lobbying that we do, and also you have GNSA out there, you have NERCSA out there, works to help explain to senators why it's not such a bad idea to have some parameters around who we are letting into the building. And that's what we spend a lot of time trying to explain to them. We can't just open up the floodgate and let everybody in, or we end up in a pretty difficult situation. 5004, full-time and part-time enrollment. This change reflects 3 key items, and we've talked about this. We gave you this information a few Cal meetings ago. I don't remember exactly what it was, but the first part is capacity limit parameters. So we're gonna have to revisit those capacity limits in both classrooms, or excuse me, grade levels and special education programs. So that will be coming your way as well. That's the first impact of the full-time, part-time enrollment. The second impact was on page 3, item 5. Non-public students may now select courses to enroll to meet the 5 credit hour stipulation to participate in activities. So basically, what changed is before there were limitations around what non-public students could choose as classes to participate. Now they have free choice of whatever class they want to take. As long as it's 5 credit hours, then they're eligible for participation in activities.
So here, that was,
They have to have 20 hours.
Yeah, wasn't it also
How's
20
that
hours?
work
They have to have 20 hours in the,
for a sport?
for the
But
previous.
could they, like, could a student just take only limited? Could they just come to the high school, try out in the spring, and then just enroll in limited?
If it's for credit,
Okay.
yep. So,
And that would be, but they could participate, because that's not an NSAA thing, is it?
no, correct, that's not a sanction. So. The fourth item, page 5,
does this change how, if a student is homeschooled, and maybe fall under the, what Mr. Suter talked about, the universities,
Now independent high school.
and this would allow them to participate in extracurricular activities, say
Mhm.
football, basketball, something like that?
Mhm.
Yep.
So that now does allow them to do that?
They,
Or have they always, or band, or?
You talking about to earn the 20 credits the semester before, or simply that 5 credit enrollment?
Yeah.
I think they have to be enrolled in our school, don't they? They can't take 5 hours through independent high school and then be eligible to participate
it's
in
through
our
our
school.
school.
it's through our school.
But
But if they
the
had the
previous-
20 previous to the
Mhm.
independent, that would count, right? It's not 20 at BPS.
Right.
And it could have been 20 at BPS. I mean, we had it, previously it said 20 credit hours. Or was it 10?
20.
20.
Because in the past, homeschool students were not allowed to participate, correct?
And that's the intent, is of the change in legislation, is to allow kids to enroll in 5 hours with 20 hours of previous, then they're eligible for activities. So that's 5004, full-time and part-time enrollment. And to be honest, a lot of it revolves around participation in activities. That's the reason for a lot of the changes. The last part was minor transportation law changes of who we have to provide transportation. So obviously we have. Okay, 5103 is what I would call the sister policy to 5004. It generally gives part-time students more flexibility to participate in schools' extracurricular activities and reflects the legislative change of 5 credit hours and mandating, and being mandated to the NSAA. So now the NSAA has changed their requirements to match that legislation of being 5 credit hours.
I would assume you still, sorry, keep asking questions on this, on that situation, they still have to fall within the NSAA requirements of where they live and all that kind of good stuff, right?
When they can transfer in and be
Right,
eligible.
yeah.
Yeah.
So did they drop to 20 hours? NSAA?
No,
Not the previous.
no. The,
So explain to me how somebody can take, they take 20 hours, the spring before, whatever. So then they go out for a fall sport, but then we take 5 hours. So then they'd be ineligible for a winter sport because, but they wouldn't have taken 20 hours the previous semester.
oh, well, if they're, so like, probably the best example that I can think of is like an incoming freshman would have had no opportunity to take 20 hours. So they can enroll in a 5-hour course, and now they're eligible throughout the course of the year. If you're an incoming sophomore, junior, or senior, the rule is you have to have 20 credit hours, but you have to enroll in a 5-hour course to be eligible.
20 hours the previous semester?
Mhm.
Okay.
So-
So they, this freshman couldn't
think-
just take 5 hours first semester, 5 hours second, and participate as a sophomore?
And why does they have to take
Yes, they
20
could.
hours as an eighth
Freshman.
grader?
I'm totally not getting it.
I mean, with that eighth grade, if they were enrolled second semester of their eighth grade year, that would qualify. But do they not count that?
They
No.
don't, no, because those wouldn't be earned towards.
But I think it comes into play. You could have a student who got 20 credit hours their freshman year, or their spring of their freshman year, and just enrolls in 5 credits the fall of their sophomore year, plays football or whatever, but then they are not able, because they only earn 5 credits in the fall semester, they're not able to participate in anything in the spring,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
only
just-
first semester that it's
Yeah.
unless they take 15 hours of credit through independent high school
Right,
to get to the 20. That's the way Gus and I interpret that.
yeah.
So that's why I said when I was up there, I don't know if it's gonna happen often.
Yeah, I don't think it is. I think
I could see where it may run into is if you're a senior, maybe your spring semester, you technically have enough credit hours.
And you wanna play baseball.
And you want to play baseball, so you could just take one class and still play baseball and then be done, right?
Like right now, our high school our rules have been, they have to be in 4 classes, part-time student.
I could see that maybe
So
where
that-
it's
that
comes
have to
more
change.
into play would be that spring of your senior year.
Or even the fall of their senior if they're gonna graduate at midterm.
Well,
Yeah.
That doesn't seem like was that the purpose though of the legislation?
I think the purpose of the legislation is that they are catering to a minority.
Yeah, okay. This is all good.
This is all good.
Yeah. Okay. Option enrollment, the next one, also changed pretty significantly, and we have some options with this one. So you can see what we currently have, and we've gone with option 1 in the past, and we now have option 1 and 2 that we can look at. So I think my personal opinion is probably easier just to stick with option 1. But sections 55 through 57 of LB 705 revamped the Nebraska's option enrollment laws for special education students. So a lot of this is dealing now with how we handle special education students, which is why I talked about the capacity limits earlier. Under these new laws, a district generally cannot declare its entire special education program to be at capacity. Instead, we must review and assess an option student's needs on a case-by-case basis and make an individualized determination of whether the district has the capacity to provide the needed services or accommodations for that student. So if we get an option application, in the past, we could say if they had an IEP, our special education program was full. Now we have to look at what's their identified special need, and on a case-by-case basis determine if that particular capacity or that particular program is full. The updates to the policy affect the capacity. We'll have to have a capacity resolution And we'll also, there's a sample letter that we'll provide that reflects those updates. And board should plan to include these new changes when reviewing and approving their capacity resolutions for option students. It requires the resolution be adopted by October 15th. And I think it's probably in our best interest, like I said in the last board meeting, to get all this done and finalized in August. So we'll be working on those capacities and bringing them to you, so they're ready to start the school year. Those two main areas are, of policy 5006, are highlighted to draw attention to the optional parts of the policy. If we want to keep one part or neither, we can do that. You can remove or alter them. But I think in order to remain consistent, we stick with the option one that we've been using in the past. That would be my recommendation. So we stick with that option one waiver. And then we also have to make sure that communications take place. If an option is denied, communication is given back as to why the reason they were denied.
There's still also the ability to evaluate on a case-by-case basis.
Yes. And the SPED director is gonna have to make a lot of determinations on those case-by-case basis, which programs are full and which programs aren't. So Beth will be working, used to just be the superintendent, could make that determination if the program is full, but now the SPED director has to be part of that, which she was anyway. It doesn't change a whole lot of what we do. All right, 5101, student discipline. The student discipline law changed. We already do a lot of what's created in this change, but we must have a release from, hold on. So we just went over 5101, no pre-kindergarten through this Student Discipline Act, no pre-kindergarten through second grade student may be suspended from school unless they bring a deadly weapon to school in a school vehicle or to a school activity. That's the change that Mrs. Repple and Mr. Jansen and Ms. talked about. So that was part of the Student Discipline Act change. Students cannot be compelled to attend an alternative education program to complete homework or coursework. So if a student is given a choice to attend our alternative program or educational program, there has to be a meeting between which we already do these things already, there has to be a meeting between the parent, the administration, and the student to determine best placement for them. There has to be the development of a plan for behavior modification, educational objectives, and financial resources and community programs available to meet those behavior and educational objectives, and monthly reviews to assess the student progress toward those things. So basically, in the Student Discipline Act, students now have a bit of a choice in terms of alternative education programs. We have to work through that, and we have been in the past, but apparently there were schools that weren't, that we have to make sure that we're meeting those qualifications if a student is assigned to an alternative education program. Okay. Graduation. This is more informational than anything. 5205, we've been talking to you a lot about that. So basically, we've been talking about the fact that the graduation requirements would be changing with the addition of the computer science course. One of the other changes that was made that is already something that Beatrice Public Schools has been doing is the requirement of a personal finance class. So, but we just want to bring it to your attention that those things are changing. We've made accommodations for them. eighth grade students will be taking the computer science class to prepare that eighth grade class for that change. So when they enter high school, they're ready to go.
I thought that personal finance was dictated to us.
Yes, it was.
It was.
That personal finance is from legislation as well, computer sciences as well.
They did relax the time frame of the computer science implementation, but we're just gonna go ahead and go forward with it, so those kids are ready when they're,
Because we're offering it, because we're pushing it at that eighth grade level is where we're pushing it into and giving them high school credit as an eighth grader. That's why we have to make sure that these kids have it, because our current eighth graders are going to be the first class that will have to have it for their graduation.
Does that class affect their high school GPA?
Yes. Because it is a high school class. Yep. So that is the other message that we will have to work with those
Make sure,
students,
yeah.
that they understand that this is a high school class, and if they fail it, they will have to retake it.
Could we,
Because
I'm just thinking, could we have it pass-fail?
we probably could absolutely have a pass-fail. That would be kind of nice.
That it wouldn't affect their grade GPA.
No, that would be, let's me check into that with the state. I'll do that one just to verify and get it in writing before we do it, so that we have it.
Otherwise, I think, obviously it's making sure that's clear to those students.
Absolutely.
Right.
I'm just telling you, they don't, even ninth graders don't understand grade
No.
point average.
Cause I hate for a kiddo just, he's still in eighth grade, still in middle school, I know this doesn't count, and then they get to high school and.
You got a D.
It'd be great if we could do pass-fail.
Let me check on that one.
Just would issue credit.
Is this gonna be an ongoing practice if they take it in eighth grade, or just this next class?
Probably an ongoing practice, because at this point in time, we do not have staff at the high school to cover this endeavor. I mean, we would need to hire a brand-new teacher just to teach computer science in order to make sure all kids have it. So, and then we just have to figure out what do we shift off. So, I think there are things that we're looking at. Do we not replace a business teacher and hire a computer science teacher instead? But then we have to look and say, okay, that work-based learning, we are right now trying to figure out how to address the work-based learning. So, there's so many moving parts. And that's the hardest piece is right now, we know every eighth grader takes a computer science class.
And I think, Doris, the changes they've made in just computer science curriculum at the middle school is.
Oh, they're cool,
Oh,
yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
you would know too, so.
Well, I'm just curious if then we will have a parent ask, well, my child took algebra in eighth grade, so why can't they have high school credit for us? I mean, can you just say only this class?
Yeah.
All
We
right.
can. And we did, geometry was the only class that we used to give high school credit for, when students took it. But other than that, we have not, yeah.
and there are other advantages to them taking it in eighth grade. It opens up another slot for an elective for them to take as well. So
Yeah.
we've talked about that.
Is a pass-fail minimum grade a C or a D?
No, sir, it's just a D.
Okay.
All right, good questions.
It'd be a 70%.
6212 is the next one up, and basically, more good news there. We've already made this change, so an informational item for you. We've made the changes to the dates effective through legislation. 6215, collection of information relating to dyslexia. This is a new, this is per LB 298 that passed in 705. It's a new requirement for districts that requires school districts to submit information from about student dyslexia to the NDE. The NDE then will collect that data and provide a report to the legislature about dyslexia in public schools. So this is one of those reports that we're gonna have to be collecting data on across the scope of the year. And at the end of the year, we're gonna have to report that to the NDE, just like we report instructional hours, transportation requirements. Now have to report on dyslexia, which is, the reason this is challenging is because as educators, we are not practitioners. We do not have the capacity to diagnose dyslexia. And that, a lot of people think that as teachers, our teachers should be saying, yep, this kid has dyslexia. Well, that's not the case. We can't do that because it's a medical situation. So what we're gonna have to do, under the direction of the NDE, is determine and collect that information, submit that report, and then the NDE is gonna have to take that information and report to the legislature.
And what are they gonna do with it?
We don't know.
The nice thing is that we currently assess students through the math reading fluency as our universal screener, and they do provide us with the piece that says that the student has tendencies that they could be dyslexic, so they do have a dyslexic identifier, so to speak, and then they do have an extra screener that we can give students, and that our title teachers do give students if they think that dyslexia is an issue.
And when are students normally diagnosed? I mean,
That starts happening at K 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's where we give the universal screener, and that's where this screener tells us.
and they don't consider that a health-related item that would fall under HIPAA currently?
Apparently not.
No.
All right, 6284, initiations, hazing, secret clubs, and outside organizations. Basically, this was, the only change to this was a reference to the statute. So at the very bottom, you see the red line out. It just, we have to make that change to make sure it's appropriately registered. So that one's pretty quick. 6600, special education. There are several updates to the general special education policy to conform with recent developments and interpretations about special education law and of public schools' obligations. So a lot of this was clarity, but the first one was age limit clarity. A lot of times people don't understand, we work with students from birth to age 21 for full education opportunity, child find, and least restricted environment. So the factor here is that children birth to age 21 have full education opportunity like all general ed students. Child find means that we're working to identify students that need special services, and we do that through home visits, we do it through work with the hospital, we do it through recommendations from doctors, so on and so forth. And then finally, least restrictive environment, which means we have to try and provide the most least restrictive environment for SPED students. Second is disciplinary removal of children with disabilities, and this reflects changes to timeframes and manifestation meetings when students with IEPs are the proposal is to suspend or expel them from school. So we have what's called a manifestation meeting, and that used to have a certain amount of days that was attached to it. Now those days have changed, so the time frame has changed in which we have to, number one, make the determination whether or not it's an expulsion or a suspension, and number two, I notify the parents, and number three, have a manifestation meeting to determine what the next steps are.
And that has decreased, correct?
Correct. The number of days to make all those decisions has decreased dramatically. So it's a more, it puts a bigger crunch on the time frame to work, that our principals
To
have.
investigate and to.
Yes, to work through those situations that come with SPED students. And then access to IEPs and responsibilities to IEPs, which are things that we currently do now. They're just now put in policy through the legislation. Okay, 6700. The first three bills of the legislature that passed had to do with alcohol, firearms, and one other topic, but they do impact us, the firearm. You know, the concealed carry bill that passed, LB 77, expanded those concealed carry rights. It still prohibits firearms from being on school grounds, so that's good news. Even if you have a concealed carry permit, you cannot have a concealed firearm lawfully being possessed on school grounds unless you are a uniformed police officer. So that will have to be changed in policy as well. Which makes sense. 6921, seizure safe schools. We already have it, but we wanted to make you aware that it was a mandate through LB 705 that everybody have it, so that worked out in our favor. 8130, annual organizational meeting. As you know, each January, we,
Skip going.
You
Oh,
skipped
I did?
6930 is behavioral point of contact.
sorry, 6930, behavioral points of contact. This was put into place by the legislature a year ago through LB 852. So not this last session that just concluded, but a year ago, and it has to be implemented this year. It just says that behavioral points of contact have to be established and identified in each school building, and people have to know who those contacts are. So we have this one in place as a result of LB 852 last year. It's a new policy that we already are using. So. Skip that again on that. Seizure safe schools, sorry.
We were, you know,
8130 now.
Okay.
After.
8130, annual organizational meeting. Basically, as a result of LB 750, we have to identify the secretary,
Yes, and
recording secretary.
the
which we
recording
do.
secretary.
Yes.
She's the recording secretary on the secretary, so we'll still have both positions, but we'll identify that we have a recording secretary rather than just a secretary.
Okay?
So is that second paragraph about like, because of what happened at, what was the school, the district that took like, they had to come back for a second meeting to elect a president, Bennington? Is that why that paragraph is in there about all of that? You have to, written or oral ballot and all that? And then if they don't elect one, then the current president continues.
Oh, no, wait,
I don't know if that.
Yeah,
that's always been in there?
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, that was it's in our current event that the previous four presidents, and the vice president takes. So if you were still on and I was off, and you could not elect the president, then you would take over.
I see.
Okay. 4171, resignation of certificated employees, which we talked about with the handbook. This is an attempt to help schools and school boards create clarity around, because of the ongoing teacher shortage, around state statute that applies to certificated employees. So the first part of it is that a certificated employee cannot hold contracts in the state of Nebraska with two separate districts. So that's one part of the policy, that's 79.820, or state statute. 79.829 explains that you can ask teachers to sign a letter of intent, but they don't have to sign it before March 15th. That's the floor. The ceiling then is April 15th. And so this policy addresses that, and
So if a teacher does not, if you don't receive one on April 16th, then the assumption is that teacher is resigning.
could be,
You could take that assumption.
you could take that assumption.
Mhm.
And is there still the flexibility if a teacher came to us post April 15th, then they could be released from their contract if the situation, yeah.
Mhm.
If a suitable replacement is found.
Yes.
So that's a recommended policy to help make sure that schools are addressing those things. 5602 was the naloxone
Walk zone.
policy that basically says we could provide naloxone in our buildings as long as it was properly stored to prevent a drug overdose due to fentanyl.
And we already have it.
And we already have it. So what
So
the
no
rest
need to
move?
adopt.
All right. And lastly, 6288, Chuck, you will appreciate this one. The use of artificial intelligence.
Ah, yes.
And if you haven't kept up on this is a new and challenging scenario in schools across the nation. And basically, kids can talk into a chat GPT, artificial intelligence, program on their phone or app on their phone and say, write me a paper on the Renaissance period, and it will do it for them. And so, it's on the rise. It's something that we are going to have to deal with if we haven't already. And school boards have the option to adopt a policy to specifically address how students may incorporate artificial intelligence without violating the district's plagiarism rules. So that's what this is a new policy that we would recommend that you adopt. And so it identifies the permissible uses of artificial intelligence in school assignments, and then it identifies the impermissible uses of AI in school assignments.
And we have already sent our English teachers information about this, just because we know that we knew it was up and coming. And, you know, there are good things about this artificial intelligence, there's also bad things. And so it's how do we use it as a teaching tool rather than how do we use it as a cheating tool? So those are some things that, there are some positives, but there's also plenty of negatives too. So it's how do we help students navigate that?
Okay. Those are the policies that, as a result of legislation will all need to be changed. Sorry for the confusion on a couple of those. I had it out of order in my stack, so. Questions? All right.
Does anybody want to address the board?
Would you like us to?
No, but thank you. You have, oh, you're
Thanks-
welcome.
Thanks
Come
for
on up.
asking.
Okay. Well, since there's no one that would like to address the board, I ask for a motion to adjourn.
I move that the Board of Education of District 15
Second.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned.
I'm actually impressed you got through that quick.
Thanks for the kolache, it got right through the meeting.
Yeah. I was gonna